Imagine this, a world leader snatched from his bed in the middle of the night by a foreign military. Sounds like something out of a Hollywood blockbuster, right? Well, according to our source material, this is the very real story of Operation Absolute Resolve. So let's dive right into how this absolutely extraordinary event went down.
Our story starts in the dead of night. It's January 3rd, 2026, just after 2 in the morning. The location? Caracas, Venezuela. And the target? The presidential residence itself.
Now, this wasn't just some smash and grab job, no. This was a perfectly coordinated 4-stage operation. First, a cyber attack hits the power grid, and just like that, the entire city of Caracas goes dark. Then, boom, airstrikes take out all the radar and air defense systems. The capital is now blind. Stage 3, U.S. helicopters come skimming just 100 feet over the ocean, totally invisible to any remaining detection. And finally, the elite Delta Force commandos rappel onto the roof. The assault is on.
And the result of all that incredible planning? Well, in less time than it takes to make a cup of coffee, literally 5 minutes, it was all over. The commandos had breached the residence, and the president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, was in their custody.
Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, in a secure room, the U.S. president was apparently watching the whole thing on a live feed. And his reaction? It was chillingly detached. He reportedly told the media, "I watched it literally like I was watching a TV show."
So, this just raises two massive questions, doesn't it? First, how on earth does a superpower just go and kidnap the leader of another country? And maybe more importantly, what was the real motive behind such a crazy move? Let's break down the two very different stories presented in the source material.
All right, first up, we have to look at the official story. You know, the one that was told to the world. Why did the United States claim it had to take such an extreme step? Well, the legal cover was a formal indictment from the Southern District of New York, and the charges were serious. Narco-terrorism, conspiracy to import cocaine, weapons charges. Basically, they accused him of supporting international drug trafficking for decades. The official line was that this wasn't an act of war, it was a law enforcement action against a major criminal.
But then, our source material introduces a very powerful alternative theory, one that suggests this had nothing to do with drugs, and everything to do with a simple 3-letter word, oil. Let's see how that narrative stacks up.
And this chart, wow, it really puts the stakes into perspective. You see, Venezuela doesn't just have a little oil. It has, at 303 billion barrels, the largest proven crude oil reserves on the entire planet. That's more than Saudi Arabia, and it absolutely dwarfs the reserves in the United States.
Just let that number sink in for a second. 303 billion barrels. We're talking about almost a fifth of the world's total known reserves, all sitting under one country. And look, this wasn't a new fight. The source lays out a timeline of tension that goes back for decades. It really kicks off when Hugo Chavez nationalizes the oil industry, which basically kicked out American companies. That was followed by a failed U.S.-backed coup and then years and years of crippling economic sanctions. The battle over who controls that oil has been long and very bitter.
So what about those drug charges? This is where the official story starts to look a little shaky. The source material points to data like this. The U.S. indictment says 200 to 250 metric tons of cocaine came from Venezuela. Okay, but in that same period, Guatemala was estimated to have exported 1,400 metric tons, way more, and yet there was no military raid on Guatemala.
But maybe the biggest clue about the oil motive comes from this alleged quote. The day after the operation, President Trump reportedly wasn't talking about drugs. He said it was the greatest theft in the history of America. They took oil away from us. He actually called Venezuela, controlling its own natural resources, a theft from America.
So, okay, whatever the motive was, drugs or oil, there's still a huge question hanging over all of this. Was any of it even legal? Let's take a look at the fallout both under international and U.S. law.
Well, the global reaction was fast and it was overwhelmingly negative. A huge majority of nations, we're talking big players like Brazil, China, Russia, Mexico, Spain, they all condemned the operation. They said it set a dangerous precedent for a world that's supposed to be based on rules. And that condemnation came from the very top. The United Nations Secretary General went on record stating plainly that this action was a direct violation of the UN Charter. That's, the foundational document for modern international law.
The U.S. administration tried to frame this as just a simple law enforcement function.
but look at the reality of it. Over 150 military aircraft, cyber warfare, airstrikes, dozens of people killed. I mean, does that sound like a police action to you?
And the source argues this move breaks a core principle of international law, Article 2, Paragraph 4 of the UN Charter. It's the whole idea of national sovereignty, and the argument is that this operation just completely shattered it.
But the potential legal problems didn't just stop there. According to the source, the operation was launched without getting any approval from the U.S. Congress, which is a clear requirement in the American Constitution for acts of war. So this action may have been illegal under America's own domestic law, too.
And all of this brings us to one final and honestly pretty disturbing question. What kind of world does an action like this create? What is the real precedent that's been set by Operation Absolute Resolve?
The source suggests the philosophy behind the raid is a very simple and very old one. Might makes right. It sends the message that rules exist only for the weak. The powerful can do all they wish to do.
And that's the real danger, isn't it? If the United States can do this without any real consequences, then what's to stop China from doing something similar in its sphere of influence? Or Russia? It risks turning the whole world into a free-for-all, where the most powerful just take whatever they want.
And so, we're left with this one last unsettling thought. This operation wasn't really just about one man or one country's oil. It was about the future of global order itself. And it forces us all to ask, when the powerful get to write the rules, who is left to hold them accountable?